Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. He's right behind you. We'd go out around one, climbing through bedroom windows. We'd try to land softly on bushes and backyard lawns. Some of us went barefoot. Some hid a spare pair of sneakers under porches or tucked under tarps used for covering patio furniture. Some of us just liked being barefoot. It made us feel as though we'd have the strength that comes from mimicking the uncivilized. Some of us would play the whole game with no shoes. No shoes, no shirts. One of us liked to play the game in only his boxer shorts. He would dare anyone to mention his near nakedness. I'm not gay for running around the woods in my underwear. You're all gay for looking at me in my underwear. This is teenage logic. Everything is a chess match where both players have only recently discovered how to play Monopoly. Board games were daytime affairs. We would play them by the above-ground pools and in basements while our parents were at work. We were old enough to be home alone, provided we memorized the phone numbers of all the retired neighbors who could, theoretically, get to us quickly in the event of an emergency. Practically speaking, 70-year-old Mrs. Hasher would not have been able to help any of us had a deranged murderer targeted us the way they did in the cable movies we weren't supposed to watch. But our parents told themselves stories the same way we did. Stories about safety. Stories about good neighborhoods. Stories about how much a locked door could accomplish. Years ago, a girl had been abducted from her home on our street. But the rumor was she opened the door when a stranger knocked. Our parents didn't say it, but they secretly believed that meant she deserved to be kidnapped. I mean, if your kid is dumb enough to open up the door for just anybody, they told themselves that we, their children, were smarter than that. Smarter than that girl. We were not smarter. We were, in fact, a lot dumber than her. Of course, we didn't know that. We thought we were geniuses. Genius, warrior, punks with wisdom and ferocity, and all before our 15th birthday. We believed people were jealous of us, but we didn't know who these people might be. We believed that everyone at school had gone to at least second base, and we were ashamed to have never seen a naked girl in real life. We laughed at the word condom, but we believed, given the opportunity, that we would be intrinsically fantastic at lovemaking. At school, we had posters in our locker of Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and those of us who had gone to first base had that one poster of Cameron Diaz that would have gotten us suspended if a teacher saw it. We'd gather at each other's lockers and discuss the arrangements for the game that night. We'd agree on a spot in the woods. Some of us liked meeting at the tree that had been split in half by lighting. Some liked the rock formation that resembled an old man kneeling with his head down. Once the location was agreed upon, we'd argue about the time. Some of us wanted to meet at midnight on the dot. We didn't realize that we were in love with the poetry of it, because we swore we hated poetry based on what our teachers had us read. Some wanted to do it later, much later. Some wanted to meet at 3 or 4 so that the game would last until dawn. Tomorrow's Saturday. We don't have school. What's the problem? The problem was that some of our parents got up around dawn. Some of our mothers would have a heart attack if they woke up and found our beds empty. Some of us didn't want to worry our parents. Some of our fathers used a belt if we misbehaved. Some of us cared about our parents too much to let them know what their children were up to at night. Some of us feared our parents more than we feared anything in the woods. Some of us feared nothing. Some of us loved the idea of being gone when our parents woke up, making them think that we'd escaped, that we were on a runway train somewhere, moving further and further away from them. Some of us liked the feeling of the belt on our skin because it solidified the hate we felt for the people we were meant to love the hardest. We'd usually meet a little after 1. If it was warm out, we'd meet by the lake where the summer camp used to be until it went out of business. The cabins were still there, and the picnic tables, and the signs that said mess hall and nurse's office. The paint on the signs was fading. Vines were growing over the cabin windows. We didn't explore the camp at night. Even the bravest among us weren't that fearless. We'd seen at least one horror movie that took place at a camp, and we didn't want to be chased by a man with a mask. We only wanted to play a game. In our game, if you followed the rules, you didn't get hurt. Nothing bad happened. If you broke the rules, the game was over for you. But that was it. No injuries, no harm. It was all about stamina, sustaining yourself throughout the night. There wasn't really any loss. There wasn't even a real way to win. Bragging rights were all we had to play for, and yet they seemed more valuable than the $100 bills our fathers would leave out on the kitchen counter as though tempting us to steal. Some of us did steal. Some of us felt the belt. Some of us liked it. But we'd never say who. We started by the lake, and we faced off against each other, eye to eye with another boy standing a foot away from you. That was how it began. We would face each other, take a deep breath, and say, "He's right behind you." One of us would say it. The other would listen. Then the other person would say it. "He's right behind you." And we would escalate the intensity. The rule was that you could not say anything other than those 4 words, but you could say them however you liked. We could shout them at each other. We could whisper them. Those of us who were more strategic knew that volume wasn't enough. It was about having an action, an objective. It was important to keep a verb in mind: beg, cajole, beseech, caution, plead, convince, convince, convince. He's right behind you. It didn't matter that we played this game several times a week for 2 years. It didn't matter that we knew that nobody was behind us. Inevitably, someone would get spooked. One of us would run home. That first hint of terror was contagious. Soon, more of us would be retreating back to our homes. It was rare that more than 3 or 4 of us would be left by the end of the night. If your partner ran away, you would find someone else who had also lost their partner. And you would face off against them, speaking the 4 words. If you were the only one without a partner, you stood silently and waited for someone to leave. Like most boys our age, we had no respect for anything we were meant to respect, and the utmost respect for imaginary things and made-up scenarios, school and church and authority and death were all laughable to us. But this game that we had created out of nothing, this was something to be taken seriously. None of us could remember who started it. Maybe an older boy who had since graduated from childishly sneaking out of his room at night. Maybe we all put it together like a story composed of hormones and dirty sweat. Maybe it didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping it alive for as long as we could. We never spoke of the game outside of planning it between classes at our lockers. We never talked about who was good at it or bad at it. We never talked about who stayed the longest or who left first. We just played. We played, and we never planned to stop playing. One night, one of us was staring at his partner when he saw the other boy's eyes look slightly to the left. This was against the rules. You only looked at your partner. You used the 4 words to scare them, if you could. You didn't involve physicality, not even a slight shift in focus. The other boy began to shake his head. This was wrong. This was against the rules. None of us knew what to do if someone broke the rules, because nobody had ever broken the rules. There were no referees, and even if there were, it wouldn't have mattered now, because there were only 2 boys left on that night. The other boy appeared to almost choke. He coughed out the words, "He's right behind you." The other boy looked as though he was going to raise an arm, raise a hand, point to something. Instead, he ran off. The other boy wasn't supposed to run off. You were supposed to wait until the other person said the 4 words. You were supposed to give them a chance to scare you back. One of us stood there that night, all alone, and felt an immense pride extending down his shoulders and off into the ground below his feet. He was the only one left. A laugh barked past his lips. It was a nervous laugh, but he didn't know where the nerves were coming from, and he wondered if he could get home before his father banged on his door to wake him up for school. If not, it would be the belt. But did that mean anything? He was the last one of us still standing there in the woods. He's right behind me. He didn't know why he said it. It wasn't true. There was nobody behind him. Every sound was natural. Every presence an imagined one. Every instinct to flee was his paranoia trying to torment him now that all his fellow competitors were gone. He would stand in the woods for as long as he liked. He would enjoy this moment. Despite winning nothing, he would tell himself he was a winner. He was no longer one of us. He was someone else. He's right behind me, but the game was over. There was nobody left to scare. A belly full of apples. Well, explain to me what it was doing on the tree if I wasn't meant to eat it. I had a long, hard day, Adam. If you remember correctly, you were supposed to name all the animals with tails, while I handled the green ones. The next thing I know, you're passed out by the water circle, taking yet another one of your naps. That left me to come up with all those names, and by the time I was done, I was famished. The apple tree is the closest to the water hole, and that's why I picked an apple. It was convenient. I wasn't deliberately trying to disobey the Lord. After an exhausting day, I simply wanted whichever fruit I could get to first. Can you explain to me why God put the forbidden fruit so close to us and made it so red to draw our attention to it, and made it so tasty? Adam, if you could try an apple, you would never be the same. I cannot describe its delectability. You may as well try one now. We've already been cast out. It's not as though he's going to cast us out again. If you ask me, it's unbelievably rude of him to have us name every living creature on earth, put all the acceptable fruit out of reach, and then kick us out of the garden once all the tedious tasks are completed. He didn't even say thank you, not even a card expressing his thanks. I realize cards haven't been invented yet, but if he can create an entire universe in a few days, I think he can figure out a way to show gratitude. Don't you? Oh, stop crying, Adam. This place isn't so bad. Sure, it isn't paradise, but there are some plants with needles sticking out of them, and some lovely dust, and a lot of very interesting rocks. That one looks sharp. Be sure to never pick it up and drop it on anybody's head. Please cover yourself up. I don't know why, but for some reason, I can't stand the sight of you in all your nakedness. Shame. What's that? No, you know I don't listen when he talks. It's so loud. and condescending. Do this, do that. Name this, worship me. Stop rolling your eyes at me, Eve, or I'll turn you back into a rib. It's all so boring. If any of it were all that vital to know, he'd write it down on a piece of stone. I suggested that to him once, and he pretended it was a bad recommendation. But secretly, I think he filed it away to use at a later date. The first time I see a rock with a rule on it, I'm going to look up at the sky and say, "Wow, who gave you that idea?" See if I don't. I'm not afraid of him, you know. You might be, but I'm not. I've barely had time to contemplate my own existence, so the threat of having my existence nullified is of no concern to me. Clearly, he doesn't want to get rid of us and start from scratch, or he would have done it already. No, he wants to teach us a lesson. He wants us to wander aimlessly for the remainder of our lives, cloaked in this thing called shame. I shall not. I refuse. I have nothing to be ashamed of, and I will not pretend that I do. A man makes a silly rule, and if the rule is broken, that does not make it any less silly. I don't care what sort of man it is. I don't care if you say God is not simply a man. He sounds like a man. And because he can sound any way he likes, that means he wants to sound like a man. We call him he, don't we? Then he is a man with made-up rules for living that I was never going to obey. I don't care if he hears me. Let him hear me. I am meant to spend the rest of my days surrounded by needle plants and you, a man with one rib. I am meant to wear rags because not wearing them makes me feel strange. I am meant to have children, I suppose, based on how disagreeable I am and how stupid you are. I can't imagine they'll be very endearing children. Once those children are here, I have no idea who they'll have children with, because it'll just be us. I guess that means once we die, and our children die, that'll be the end of this nonsensical little experiment. Oh, but at least we named the giraffes first. A question for you, Adam. Since he isn't responding to us, why are we the only ones who can't eat the apples? I specifically saw a loud bird eating an apple the other day. Why weren't all the loud birds cast out of the garden? If a giraffe eats an apple, will it be thrown out of the garden? Why were we the only ones prohibited? Right, the knowledge. We're not meant to know anything. We're just meant to assign names, be fruitful, multiply, and praise him every chance we get. If we want knowledge, then it's out we go. Well, Adam, I choose to know. I choose to know things. Not just some things, but everything. Why create an entire world and then tell me I'm not allowed to know anything about it? I can't help but feel this was all some kind of test, and I will not be tested. Had I known that he was testing me, I would have eaten every apple on that tree. I would have stared up at him with the seeds falling out of my mouth, and I would have laughed. For if I am to go into exile, I am not going with an empty stomach. I will go with a belly full of apples. My only regret is that I stopped at one. I will not feel badly about you being punished for something I did either, because I have been punished many times over for you, for your laziness, for your superiority complex, for the way you smell at night when you are pressed up against me. It reeks so that I can barely sleep. Yet I have said nothing, because I have accepted that we are joined forever. You make strange noises in your sleep, but he never punished you for that. I took one bite, and we are damned. Be angry if you like, Adam, but do not expect me to worry myself over your anger. Your anger is your business. I will not make it mine. Last night, before he woke us with our punishment, I had a dream. I had a dream that all of this was submerged in water. Enough water to cover even the tops of the tallest trees. There were more people, lots more. They were running and screaming. Some were already drowned. In the distance, I could see a large boat, but it was too far away. I would never reach it in time. I would die alongside all these strangers. Instead, I lay myself down. I began to float, right up to the surface. I could still hear the wailing and the pleading all around me, but I was not making a sound. I simply laid like that on the surface of the water and let it take me wherever it wanted to go. Jingles. I moved the knife quickly, slicing with apt purpose. The bell of the cat's collar fell to the floor. Jingle, jingle. This was the third time I've done this since we first got this cat. I just can't stand the jingling of the collar, and I wanted it to look like the cat had somehow clawed it off, or had rubbed it against something outside, causing it to scrape off. Hopefully, my family will stop insisting that the cat have a bell on her collar after realizing she's just going to keep losing it. Nothing against the cat, of course. Each time I cut that bell off of her collar, she just looks up at me curiously, possibly even thankfully, as if she too can't stand the sound of its jingling. Though I'm certain that the cat and I hate the sound of small jingling bells for two very different reasons. My wife, our 3 kids, and I recently moved to my old hometown. I was eager to leave this place as soon as I turned 18, and I couldn't explain to my wife why I didn't want to move back. The same reason why I can't explain to her why I hate the sound of jingling. I was just a kid. One summer here, when I was 12, my friends and I were hanging out on Main Street. "I want strawberry," the little kid exclaimed. They were probably 6 or 7, and they bounced excitedly, up and down, with a shining grin from one ear to the other, their hands raised up, one clenched around a handful of change. They were smiling adoringly up at the clown, who was dancing in front of an ice cream truck. Turning to the little boy with a smirk and a wink, the clown sang, "For $1, 1 strawberry. I've prepared it for you, especially." The clown was tall and slender. The makeup around his face was white with dark pink triangles around his mouth as well as his eyes, which were both wide and kind. He wore a large sky blue drape over a striped unitard with different shades of gold and purple with bright red accents. He wore a thick belt around his waist. At points around this belt, as well, from threads of the blue drape, hung small, brass and shiny bells, which rang a chorus of jingling with every movement, and sang a nameless tune whenever he danced. And how this clown loved to dance. "Mr. Jingles! Mr. Jingles!" another kid cried. "Can I have an ice cream sandwich?" The clown, Mr. Jingles, widened his eyes as he looked down at her. He took a deep breath as his smile grew and said, "You're the first today to say my name. This one is for free." He gave her a free ice cream sandwich and did another dance as his feet kicked out, revealing 2 more jingling bells, each one attached to the tip of each of his curled shoes. He did little magic tricks with his hands, and all the children around him laughed and cheered. Some even tried mimicking his dance around him. My friends and I sat on our bikes at a distance, watching the laughable spectacle. "I betcha he diddles kids," Richie said with a snort. "Nah," Brady retorted. "My mom says he's retarded. He probably doesn't even know what to do with his junk." We all laughed at that. I scoffed, saying, "Whatever his problem is, he's fucking creepy." "Ain't that the truth?" Levi said. "I can't be the only one who wants to do something about this guy." Each one of us turned to look at Levi. We didn't really have a leader, but if there was ever a title holder for lead troublemaker, it was Levi. We knew he had something brewing in his mind ever since he first saw Mr. Jingles, and I was eager to stick it to that clown. "What you thinkin'?" I asked, a mischievously wide smile growing on my face. "Simple," Levi said coldly. "We fuck with the clown until he leaves, and we make sure he stays gone." I had the simple job of distracting the clown. I thought this was the dumbest role placement in the history of pranks, seeing as I was never much of an actor. So when I walked up to Mr. Jingles, I just did what first came to my mind and started asking questions. "Hey, clown, what flavors you got?" Mr. Jingles whirled in my direction. The quickness of that sudden movement and my proximity to him, I realized I was much more scared of this clown than I had initially thought I ever could be. "Little kiddo," Mr. Jingles exclaimed, "I've got flavors to match the rainbow." He kicked a leg out in a small dance maneuver. "I've got sweets to make your hair grow." He laughed. "I've got strawberry and chocolate, and long as you've got your wallet, I've got vanilla and mint, with a flashy green tint. There's pistachio and Neapolitan, but try not to get it on your chin." He laughed and chuckled, and that innocent sound within it made me start to think that maybe he didn't deserve to get ran out of town. I couldn't explain it, but he soothed me. All the fear and enmity I felt towards the clown seemed so unjustified now. But it was too late. Richie and Brady started banging against the hood of the ice cream truck while making guttural monkey noises. Mr. Jingles turned, his wide smile melting away in a thin line of confusion. He walked over to my friends, saying, "Heyo, kiddos, how about and was cut off when the truck's engine started. The clown's head turned, and his mouth opened to a wide O of shock as he looked through the windshield. Levi was in the driver's seat and had turned on the truck. He started to run and shouted, "Oh no, kiddo, Mr. Jingles doesn't think," and was interrupted again when Richie pushed the clown over Brady, who was knelt behind him. The two ran away laughing. I was about to run too, and that's when I realized that Levi had more planned for what was meant to be a spread-out string of pranks on Mr. Jingles. As the clown gasped on the pavement, Levi revved the engine and then put the car in drive. He dove out of the side of the truck and sprinted down the block, faster than I'd ever seen him run before. I turned back, just in time to watch as Mr. Jingles's ice cream truck ran over his midsection. This caused the vehicle to swerve, forcing the rear tires to crush the clown's face. The body of the clown convulsed and spazzed. A monstrous ringing of disturbed jingling from the bells overlaid the tones of crushing bones, and a sound like that of a tossed watermelon. I was motionless and numb in indescribable horror as the vehicle rolled softly away, and I looked at the smeared remains of what used to be a human face. Blood gushed spastically out of a gaping maw that was once the mouth of Mr. Jingles, and more of it oozed out of his ears and coagulated in the ruffled tangles of his dyed pink hair. I stepped back, slowly at first, then turned and ran in the same direction as my friends. We were never named for that crime, though I knew my dad had his suspicions that we had something to do with it. It wouldn't be for a few years later that I wished we had come clean. After all, it was just supposed to be a prank. I don't think Richie and Brady thought Levi would do something like that, and I certainly didn't. I think I was just scared of what Levi would do if he ever found out I ratted him out. So I stayed silent. Now that I'm back here, all these years later, I stood outside our house in the dead of night with my cat and her recently defaced collar at my feet. And I wondered if the mysterious death of Mr. Jingles is still talked about, and if anyone ever thought of any leads. I wondered why it was so difficult to get in touch with Richie or Brady or their families. Maybe I would try to get in touch with Levi, but part of me doesn't want to see the man he grew up to be. A thick fog was creeping down the street. I watched as it grew, frothing up my driveway. I began to wonder if the reason why I couldn't get a hold of my friends was more simple and yet more outlandish than anything more feasible than moving away. The fog had reached my feet, and the cat meowed frightfully, and with a hiss ran somewhere behind the house. But here I stood, watching the wall of unnaturally decisive fog move towards and envelop me. I stood here, waiting for what I knew I had been due for some time. I know it wouldn't matter if I tried to run from it or not, because I'm here in this town, and the consequences of my part in a joke gone wrong are here to greet me. Through the thick fog, I can hear the distorted sound of an ice cream truck's song approaching, and through the fainted beat can be made out the cacophonous ringing, as if some pair of jingling bells attached to two slippered feet. Jingle, jingle, blow your head off. Caution, based on true story. Contains gore. It's all fun and games until you blow your head off. Before the 1960s, before I made this my home, our lovely town was known for stately elm trees canopying the main street north of the river. But a deadly elm tree disease raged through, infecting them all. The ones not killed quickly succumbed to progress, as the street was widened to 4 lanes instead of 2 for the thoroughfare through town. The Men's Garden Club decided to beautify the landscape by planting a few flowers. That project soon turned into lovely, bright pink petunias lining all the main highways in the city. When my dad took a job at the local mental health asylum before he moved the rest of us here, I remember him sending us a postcard showing the streets lined with petunias sweeping under the memorial arch, with the name of the town emblazoned upon it. Another landmark of the town. When our family arrived, that was the first sight I saw of our new home. As the plantings increased, a petition was made to the state, and soon the community of 15,000 was dubbed the Petunia City. In a short time, an annual celebration was created to honor the designation, called the Petunia Festival, held around the 4th of July. The festival midway games and rides, along with arts and craft or car shows, bingo, and a beer garden with live bands, attracted huge crowds from all over. It even became renowned enough that a popular game show in the early 70s, the dating game, presented a trip to the Petunia Festival as the grand prize to the winning couple. Welcomed as dignitaries, the excited couple became the grand marshals of the parade that year. I'm sure the experience made a lasting impression on them. The party always ended with a spectacular fireworks display, locally provided by a certified trained family who volunteered their services. In my teenage years, in a town without a lot to do other than cruising Galena Avenue from Peoria Avenue to the south, to Lowell Park Road, to the north, back and forth, not counting stopping to sit at the courthouse corner to wave at other cruisers. The 4th of July Petunia Festival was the highlight of the summer. Lots of fun and games. Walking the midway hand in hand with someone special. Hawkers trying to get him to win you a prize. Stealing a kiss on top of the Ferris wheel. Eating elephant ears and corn dogs. Feeling nauseous after the spinning rides. Participating in the talent contest. Dancing to the music. Watching the marching bands compete. In my very young motherhood years, it was a struggle to get all my children downtown, at least for the fireworks. This particular year stands out in my memory. My husband was a police officer on a small police force, overstressed as the population exploded on those few days. He was not available to help much with the family. We may have taken the little ones to Kids' Day for a short time to ride the kiddie rides. The carnival company often comped the force a few free coupons, and I may have gotten my younger sister to walk the few blocks from my parents' house to the parade route alongside me with the stroller and the other two in tow. What little ones don't love a parade? But for the fireworks, I was on my own. Anyway, I don't remember planning to go with anyone else. My high school sweetheart husband and I had 4 kids in 5 years, back in the early 70s. I believe their ages at the time must have been 5, 4, 2, and I was expecting my bicentennial baby. Exactly why I thought it was even necessary to attend those sparklers on my own with all those babes. In my condition, I'll never know. The festival is held on the high school grounds along the river. A lovely setting for the fireworks, reflecting over the river. Trouble is, there aren't any parking lots close by, which means street parking wherever and however close you can get. The viewing is great if you can get to standing room only on the bridge. Otherwise, it is, well, up in the air. Hard to tell until the blossoms start exactly where you can see them from, due to trees blocking most displays. Over the years, one thinks they have it figured out. Then the organizers suddenly decide to change the venue. Starting point. I cannot tell you how many different viewing spots we have selected or rejected. Anyway, back to my waddling all over town stroller and 2 cranky, tired toddlers in tow. Ah, nice grassy spot at end of bridge, big enough for blanket, and maybe a shot at seeing something. Hope the noise isn't too scary for my tots. For some reason, I am remembering when I was little, I never wanted to get too close, for fear a spark might land on me. Anytime I saw someone in a wheelchair, I wondered if that is what happened to them. Hello, Mary. So nice to see you. My musing was interrupted by a somewhat familiar voice. Oh, great. My old boyfriend. Wouldn't you know, haven't seen him for years. And he finds me looking oh so fine. Hi, Joe. Great to see you too. You remember Maureen, right? Her family moved into the old Victorian farmhouse you used to live in. We got married. We are expecting our first baby. Looks like you have another on the way. Are all of these yours? Can never have too many. Congratulations to both of you. They have a way of changing your life, but in a good way. Well, enjoy the show, and best of luck to you. And to you, too. Ah, the booms have started. Thank goodness. My little troop actually were enjoying the action. Even with all the noise and commotion around us, seemed it was ramping up. Then suddenly, it all went silent. There was an extremely long pause, way longer than I ever remember between starbursts. The crowd noticed and seemed to get fidgety and restless. That display was far shorter than usual, and there was no grand finale when they send up multiples at one time. Were they that short on funds this year? Sometimes they would send out donation seekers to pay for next year's display. No one had been around to our corner yet, and the time dragged on and on. Suddenly, you could hear the wails of ambulances. Oh no! Something bad must have happened. They are headed to the area the fireworks are detonated. That is not good. Not good at all. There was mumbling among the crowd. It was obvious the show was over for the night, and people started drifting away, scratching their heads and wondering why. I gathered my crew, and we started our trek back to our vehicle. My husband knew, and it wasn't good. The young man in charge of lighting off the display had a problem with one tube. No one present actually saw the moment it happened, but he must have been leaning over the faulty tube, looking for the problem, when it exploded in his face, decapitating him. All the witnesses could immediately see was him engulfed in smoke. I didn't know it at the time, but this man lived in our neighborhood. His 2 children went to school with my children. His widow never did remarry and passed away a few years ago. She was a very strong woman to survive what she did and raise her children on her own. The tragedy was also devastating to the Petunia Festival. The Paul pulled the fireworks off the agenda for years afterwards. The event will turn 60 years old this summer. Yes, it is all fun and games, until someone blows his head off. Not the brightest bulb. The light panned over the coast, gutting the night like a blade through a fish's belly. Emerson. Li Sao Sao. From experience, he knew the storm would be raging well into the next day. But he'd be safe here. This lighthouse had weathered many storms before this one, and it would weather many more after, too. It had stood here since before he was born, and it would stand long after he was dead, which wouldn't be long now, he reasoned. He raised his metal cup to the windows, which looked out onto the frothing midnight ocean. He offered the night his cheers, then sipped his neat rum. Lightning lit up the abyss, burning his retinas white for one faltering heartbeat. The wind whipped and whooped around the edges of the lighthouse. The rumble of thunder came 3 seconds later, reverberating through his bones. Emerson blinked. The ocean was a cruel mistress sometimes. He knew that more than anybody. He'd spent much of his life aboard fishing vessels, at sea for months. He felt more at home on the open sea than on dry land. That was why he'd taken on the task of lighthouse keeper after retirement. But it seemed that people had lost their respect for the water. Kids rode inflatable beds out on riptides and needed rescuing. Rich yuppies took their boats out in unsafe conditions and needed rescuing. Partying youngsters went for midnight swims whilst inebriated. They drew the attention of the sea beasts, which they then hunted for revenge. And thus, the creatures needed rescuing due to their dwindling numbers. Companies dumped their foul excretions into the blue, so the sea needed rescuing too. Emerson growled and scowled out. The thunder and lightning lashed from the heavens once again. The rain pelted sideways at the window, rattling against the glass. The gale screamed like a dying creature, wounded by a harpoon. Another sound chimed throughout the lighthouse, but this had nothing to do with thunder. He grunted. Somebody had rung the lighthouse's doorbell. Who on earth could that be? The lighthouse clung to a rocky piece of coast that jutted out into the ocean. It was far from any town or village, as Emerson liked it. The only company he usually had came in the form of passing boats and hungry seagulls. Emerson took another swig of rum and set his cup on the table. The wood bore the marks of 1,000,000 condensation rings from the rum mugs of history. He grumbled to himself and passed through the door to the spiral staircase. The doorbell rang again as he descended. With care, the final treacherous steps. He threw the door open to the howling wind. "Yar, I'm coming, I'm coming. Hold your seahorses." On the stoop, 2 kids huddled together, no older than 18. They clung to one another as the wind whipped at them, and the storm soaked them to their bones. "I'm sorry, sir," said the boy, raising his voice over the gale. "But our car broke down, and we're stranded. Can we please hold up with you until the storm has passed?" Emerson was not a people person, but he was also not a heartless monster either. He opened the door to the boy and the girl and guided them up the staircases. "Yar, come in, come in. You're wetter than water. I got some blankies upstairs. Come, let's get you and your lass dry. Me name's Emerson." The boy smiled and offered his hand despite the chill that shook him. "Thanks, man. You're the best, Harry. And this is Skyla." Emerson led them up the winding staircase to the lighthouse's upper room, lit by the beacon. He got some dry towels, stale and mud-eaten, but dry, and put the kettle on for warm tea. You must be pretty frightened. What with you stranded in the dark and the rain, while the sea beats her chest like King Kong. She can be mighty fierce." The boy pulled a face and shook his head. He wrapped a towel around Skyla's shoulders before he tended to himself. "No, inconvenienced and uncomfortable, but not scared." Emerson frowned, but bit his tongue. He guided the youngsters to his couch. It wouldn't be the first time it got wet, and handed them mugs of steeping tea. He sighed and sat down opposite them on his old rickety chair. "And what, if you don't mind me asking, were you two doing out here this late at night?" The boy and the girl blushed. Harry started to say something, but then Skyla interrupted. She shoved her left hand into Emerson's face. A diamond glinted on her ring finger. "Harry proposed to me tonight," as the sun set over the water, staining it red, the color of love. Isn't that romantic? To Emerson, red was the color of blood, once you'd chummed the waters to lure in the big fish. But he didn't say this. "Yar, it do warm this old sea dog's heart to see young love in bloom. Why, my Batilda and I, we shared quite a torrid love affair, we did. But she's been sleeping with the fishes for longer'n you been alive. I still carry her picture in this old locket here, which I wear around me neck at all times. Here, take a look at this beauty, lad, but don't lose your eye for the young lass now, The boy blinked at the picture in the sea air-rusted locket. He did a double take. He seemed to struggle for words. His eyebrows knotted together like a bowline. "Sir, that's a manatee," Emerson recoiled. "You youngsters and your unrealistic Hollywood beauty standards. You shouldn't perpetuate such unhealthy attitudes towards appearances. It only fosters anxiety and insecurity. Yar, you might be young and lovely now, but see how pretty you'll look in 60 years. Let's see how you are once the sea's done rusted your lungs and your legs been took by an orca and a great white workin' in cahoots. The girl reached over and rapped a knuckle on his shin. A smirk touched the corners of her lips. "But sir, both your legs are still attached," Emerson yelped and tucked his legs back under his chair. I jumped into the blood-stained brine. I did. Wrestled me legs back from the bellies of the respect. "What would you like, sir?" "Sir, we need you." "Ed, please don't panic. Tell me what happened." "A man died at 4th Rose Street in Pi A Trust Bakery." "Pray, tell his name." "Robert Jr. Business tycoon Robert Jr. A sudden alarm switches on in my mind. "You are right, sir." I hang up the phone. A new case is like coffee shots for me. Sudden shots of energy with a sudden smell of success. Being a private detective was tough in 1959. The remnants of World War were still haunting people's minds. So basically, everyone was behind food and money. Hence, the rise of murders and death of rich men were the constant headline of newspapers and weekly magazines. The police were sometimes behind the culprit, or were sometimes the culprit themselves. My first successful case was about Dorothy Maddock, a murder mystery that had shaken the neighborhood. At that time, I was 19, who had only read Sherlock Holmes as his curriculum and used to write some articles for a newspaper column. Back then, I took the case for justice, not for fame or success. With my wit and observation, I nabbed the murderer to everyone's surprise and dismay. The success of the case made fame kiss my toes, but the police grew cold feelings towards me. First, the bitterness was one-sided. Later, with the continued collision of our thinking and ideas, it became a competition for us to prove each other wrong. Coming to the case, Robert Jr. was famous as well as an established businessman. He was constantly in the newspaper due to the rounds of an affair between him and a beautiful singer. The case was a goldmine for the press because now it had glamour and stardom. I reached the spot. It was a small sit-in bakery with musty brown walls and white windows. It was unusual for a rich man to dine here. People were thronging outside the bakery to view the sudden death. Police were having a tough time trying to control the mob. I honk my Ford car on purpose to gain the attention of the press. In seconds, a group of photographers and cameramen with their journalists were rushing towards my car. I took some time to come out of my car, but when I came out, I was surrounded by the sudden flashes which blind my irises. There is a constant tugging and screaming of journalists at my face. I raise my hand to silence everyone, to bring their attention towards me. I will ensure that the culprit is caught, and the innocents are given justice. With the help of the police, we will solve the crime as soon as possible. Till then, please maintain your integrity and work ethics. I make a straight beeline towards the bakery, where I'm coldly welcomed by Inspector Houston. "Don't come here, fella, without any prior information. Take your media attention somewhere else." He smirks. "It would be better if you pay enough attention to your duty, rather than observing my style and sensibility." He stares at me and spits on the ground. "So what are the details of the case, Mr. Houston?" According to the witness, Robert entered the bakery with singer Sasha. They ordered a lime tart with lemonade. Then, in the middle of the conversation, an argument burst open. A few seconds later, he asks for water, which was given by Sasha from her bottle. In moments, he clenched his head and passed out. "So, where is the singer now?" "She is in the basement of the bakery, hiding from the press. Bring in all the witnesses, and let's interview each one there itself." We agreed to investigate the scene first. Nothing was weird, nor there was anything suspicious. Then we interrogated each eyewitness. First was the singer Sasha, a beautiful woman in her early 20s, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her cheeks were stained by mascara, and her lips quivered from the constant crying. It was odd that a young girl like her was interested in a man who was in his late 40s. But it is not odd in a patriarchal society. I gave her my handkerchief. A man gotta respect a lady's emotion. "So, Miss Sasha, what happened during your brunch at the bakery?" "Robert called me here to discuss some private matters. He was stressed for the past few weeks." "Can you guess what he was about to discuss?" I ask. She moves her head from side to side with few sobs. "Miss Sasha, when Robert asked for water. Instead, you could have called the waiter. Why did you provide it from your bottle?" Robert liked clean filter water. He always used to question the quality of water at restaurants. Hence, I used to carry my own source. "Did you hand over the bottle to the police?" She nodded. The next person was the waitress, the only witness who was present at the bakery. A young woman in her mid-20s, with hazel eyes and raven black hair. She was confident with her body language and was least affected by the sudden death. "What's your name?" "Rebecca Taylor." "For how long you are working here?" "Since the past few weeks." "Can you describe what happened this morning?" "Mr. Robert was coming to our bakery for the last few days, but this time he came with Miss Sasha. He ordered tart, and she ordered lemonade. It's wrong to eavesdrop on anybody's conversation, so I was at my counter cleaning the stoves. But in the middle of their conversation, they started arguing. Mr. Robert was demanding Miss Sasha to leave her career. Then he asked for water, to which she gave her own bottle, and in a matter of seconds, he clenched his head and fell on the ground. Where was the owner of the shop? Every morning, the owner goes to buy the supplies for the rest of the day. He went out as usual. The next person was the cleaner boy, who was not the witness. But he was there in the basement of the bakery when the incident took place. "What's your name?" "Vade Danish." "So, Vade Miss Rebecca told me that you went to the basement to take a puff of the cigarette. Sometimes you had to twist other people's confession to extract the truth. No, sir. Miss Rebecca had seen a few mice in our basement, so I went there to get rid of them. Okay, so for how long are you working here? 2 years. Everything was done. We talked to the witness. We investigated the scene, but couldn't find a clue. The police, as well as I, was waiting for the medical reports of the corpse, but it had a lot of time to it. Miss Sasha was on house arrest, and other people were under observation. I took a few days to search for the missing links in this case, but could not find one. This morning, I decided to give a visit to the bakery. Through the glass windows, I could see Rebecca taking orders from the customer and Vade helping his owner. I enter inside, and Rebecca gasps her breath seeing me. Did I frighten you, Miss Rebecca? No. I mean, yes. The incident has made us face the worst fears that we never could have expected. What will you like, sir? She asks in a humble tone. Oh, nothing. I just want to sit and relax for a few seconds. Nothing else. She goes away, leaving me in silence. I try to connect the information that I had about this case, but couldn't figure out any missing links. A force knocks at my temples. The migraine bouts were reoccurring every morning. I press my fingers at my head to ease out the pain. I search my pockets for the container of pills, but I couldn't find them. Sir, are you okay? I see Rebecca beside my table. Yeah, everything is fine. Nothing to bother about. She puts a tray in front of me. It has herb tea and strawberry custard. It's for your migraine, sir. It will soothe your nerves. I thank her and dig in my spoon because I have skipped my breakfast this morning. At the last spoon, a thought occurred to me. To clear it, I needed to meet the doctor who was examining the body as well as the reports. I rush out of the bakery without paying the bill and race my car to the hospital. Doctor, did Robert had a migraine? Because according to the witness, he clenched his head before passing out. Did he get a migraine attack while having the arguments with the singer? I don't know, lad. Maybe he had, maybe he hadn't. The technology isn't so developed to bring in the conclusions. What did you find in the reports? The mystery is that we couldn't find anything with his body. The brain and his other organs were intact, but his blood reports are weird. What does the report say? That during their argument, there was the sudden spike of salts in his blood flow. He had large quantities of salts in his body during his death, which we call hypernatremia. In hypernatremia, a person typically feels thirsty. The most serious symptoms of hypernatremia result from brain dysfunction. Severe hypernatremia can lead to confusion, muscle twitching, seizures, coma, and death. So, how did this condition occur in his body? Any clue? We couldn't find that, but the bottle that Miss Sasha gave had typically weird ingredients and salts. I think you should further investigate it. The police were informed about the reports, and we both rushed to the villa of the singer, who was currently under house arrest. Miss Sasha. We found salts and weird ingredients in your bottle. And Mr. Robert died from severe hypernatremia. The justice of Sword points at you, because before he had passed away, he demanded water from you. I drink salt-infused water to keep my voice intact and to keep throat infections away. She started to sob and pleaded in front of us that she was innocent. She was taken in for police custody, and the court will manage the rest of the hearing. We gave a press conference about the case and addressed questions of the media. After a few days, I visited the bakery again to pay my pending bill and to meet the staff. The staff members were happy to see me and greeted me with warm smiles. I paid my bill and talked to each staff personally. Rebecca was happy and asked me about my migraine conditions. That day, how did you know that I got a mild migraine attack? My mother was suffering from migraine, so I recognized the symptoms really fast. So, you live with your mother? No, sir. My mother passed away a year ago. I live on my own. I'm sorry to hear about your mother. Well, take this. I take $50 from my wallet and hand it over to her. Take it as your tip and use it wisely. She takes the money, and her warm finger brush with mine. Her cheeks tinge like strawberries, and she gives me a peck on the cheek. I smile at her and walk towards the door. Sir, please do come here again. I turn around and say, I will come if I have time. I know you will. I nod to her and sit into my car and drive to my home with a smile. I was watching a soap opera on television while cooking my dinner. Then I hear a knock on the front door. Who is there? I shout, switching off the television. Sir, it's me, Daniel. I take a sigh of relief and opened the door. Daniel was my counterpart, as well as my personal spy. He used to track the backstory of the cases, as well as the victim. So, Daniel, what brings you here? The back history of Robert Jr. Tell me the juicy details. He was a drug dealer in South Carolina and was once arrested while delivering a load of cocaine capsules. This businessman earns the white money with the help of the black money, I said. Listen, he used to execute his plans with the help of a female doctor. But after his arrest, she was absconding and still is on the wanted list. Here, see her photo. I take the file to view, and my head spins. I reach the kitchen counter for support. I could not believe my eyes. It was Rebecca. What happened? Daniel asked. She is the waitress who works at the bakery where Robert had died. For a few seconds, we glared at each other and rushed to our cars. I sped up my car, not worrying about getting a fine. I rush into the bakery and shout, "Where is Rebecca?" Vade rushes towards me with a note in his hand. Rebecca quit her job this morning and left a note for you. I take the note and read, "Dear Thomas, take a warm coffee with a heavy breakfast to curb your migraine attacks. Before sleeping, drink a nice herbal tea. It will cure the migraine away. And what else will you like, sir? Your friend, Rebecca." Something catches my eye across the street, and I rush towards the window to see clearly. It's Rebecca, with rendered auburn hairs and a wicked smile. She waves at me gives a flying kiss, and in the next second disappears. Betrayal. Mr. Nicholas, you have been caught for breaking and entering every house in the world once a year for as long as anyone can remember. That was what the judge said. Anything to say in your defense? Your Honor, I was delivering presents. For children, they were happy, stuttered Santa. A liar! You gave me a toy doll when I was 12 years old, yelled an adult. Well, I thought you wanted one, said Santa, wondering if this was a nightmare. And you didn't wipe your feet on the mat when you came in, said a very tall and skinny woman who was the shape of a pole. Now I have to walk around my house with the smell of reindeer dung. It's that bad? I sleep next to my reindeers, and they don't smell that bad. One very fat man, who looked like if you threw him from the tallest building, he would bounce, said, one day when I was little, I woke up on Christmas and went to my Christmas tree. I saw a box of chocolates, but guess what? It was out of date, guessed the judge. It was covered in reindeer poop, said the skinny lady. It was half-eaten? Asked another man. Wrong! He had put it under the tree. I couldn't reach it. Everyone let out a gasp, as if it was worse than what they said. The judge banged his hammer against the wooden plate. All right, it's settled. A lifetime in prison. He was shipped off to a prison for magical things. There he met the Tooth Fairy and Frosty the Snowman, a black bird with an injured wing, and a man called Jeff, who claimed he was a muffin, and Neil Gaiman. He did not know what Neil Gaiman was doing in there, but he told wonderful stories of Norse gods and a girl called Coraline. Meanwhile, the elves were relaxing in the North Pole. Every day, they would congratulate each other on how they got rid of Mr. Claus, and that it was about time that they got rid of the fatty. The reindeers were happy because they thought Santa stinked. But Mrs. Claus was the most excited. She could finally fulfill her dreams of playing video games all day, every day. Thousands of years passed, and Santa became more restless in his cage. The Tooth Fairy had been eaten by his bird more times than able to be counted. And the immortal Gaiman had told thousands of tales already, and Frosty had melted more than 1,000,000 drops of water now. And Jeff, well, he sat there more than 1,000,000 minutes already. Everyone was tired, and they were sick of seeing the same things every day: stone, metal, and plastic. One night, when the guards were walking past Santa's cell, he extended one thin finger and curled it around the key. He then pulled back his hand and put the key under his tongue in his mouth. He later took out the key and began to try and push it in on the other side. His fingers fumbled, and unfortunately, he dropped the key. From inside his pocket, he retrieved a foldable walking stick and began to prod at the key, trying to pull it back, when a mosquito landed on the back of his hand and sank its sucker into his flesh. Santa dropped the stick. He slapped the insect, turning it into a fat pile of greenish-yellow slime. He told his bird to go and fetch the stick. The bird did as he was told. Santa continued to prod at the key when Neil Gaiman couldn't take it anymore, and said that he should tell the bird to go and fetch the key instead of the stick. "You're right, so smart," said Santa in understanding. "Go get the key." A few hours later, he had escaped his cell and was now unlocking the cells of his friends. "All right, Muffin Man, you're okay now," said Santa. "I need my rock to turn into a muffin again," said Jeff gloomily. "Where is it then?" sighed Santa. "It's on the second floor of the third room to the right." "Have you been there?" asked Mr. Claus. "Duh, what do you think? Then why didn't you take it yourself?" "I didn't know how," said Jeff. It took some time, but the group eventually found the staircase and got into the specified room. Santa picked up the rock and said, "What do you mean you didn't know how?" asked Santa. Suddenly, 2 security guards stepped out of the shadows and told them to freeze and drop the rock. Santa leaped out of the closest window, thinking that his reindeers would catch him. He instead landed on a very fat moose in the middle of a barn. "Come down here, it's safe," he yelled at the window. One by one, they each plopped down Gaiman on a horse, Jeff on a pig, Frosty on a cow, and the Tooth Fairy on a very cross farmer. The fairy produced a chain of teeth out of her dress pocket and wrapped it around the farmer, like one would do to a horse. The group, holding on to their animals, eventually rode to the town where Santa's trial had been held, just in time for Christmas Eve. At the first house, belonging to the lady that had said her floor stank of reindeer dung, Frosty gave her some sanitizer under her tree. At the second house, belonging to the adult who complained about having been given a doll at the age of 12, Gaiman gave her 2 black button eyes and a sewing needle. And at the last house, belonging to the man, had complained about the chocolates. Santa gave him Jeff in his muffin form and put him on a plate next to the tree. Santa thanked everyone, and he went back to his home, the North Pole. The elves and reindeers groaned and sighed when they saw his familiar red suit. They kicked him out and built a wall around the village of Mrs. Claus. Santa realized that he was tired of seeing the elves, so he trained his bird to be a professional polar bear and penguin trainer, and everyone lived happily ever after. Just deserts. It is impossible to resist a hitchhiker on a road to nowhere. And that was exactly what my cousin Shane's wedding to Raven the following morning was going to be. It was strange that we all gathered to wish them well, when none of us would be there in 2 years, when the ineluctable breach of the sacrament was ratified by the divorce judge. After Shane's degenerate, pathological gambling resulted in the foreclosure of Raven's overpriced bungalow-style home in Boulder City, which she would naively agree to mortgage to the hilt to bail him out, setting up the bad beat betrayal she'd been waiting for from the day they met. That is the thing about El Sombreron. He ties his 4 mules to his enamoratos post, while he woos from the threshold with sweet songs strummed on a silver guitar, plucking notes of promise, woven in plaited spirals like Guatemalan braids. But once the affair begins, he leaves the stomach empty. Madre de Dios. At length, his black dogs howl their dismal mourning at the snow moon, which searches in vain, like a celestial spotlight, for what is left of the shriveled Tchaikispeo. Still, it is said that the old man never forgets the ones he has loved. I must apologize. My mind is prone to wandering. It is part of my condition. I wonder how often Pablo Tak felt the same way, baptizing savages in the frontier who were more than likely bent for a hell of their own making. How many does El Sombreron visit to pay them their wages? Sabrina, the Jamaican flight attendant, with the perfectly symmetrical face and the caramel complexion, scolded Carl, who sat right next to me, saying, "Stay seated while the seat belt sign is illuminated. Don't make me tell you again." The seat belt light had been illuminated since the plane touched off, and tropical storm Tomas caught us in its clutches, sending us in an interminable loop between Tortilla Flats and Scottsdale. Carl muttered something under his whiskey-smelling breath. Sitting down, Carl released a low, rumbling cough that rattled in his chest like a cracked carburetor. We were off to a famous start. I didn't know how long I'd had a demon, but El Sombreron was in the back row with his broad-brimmed, high-crowned black hat angled down while he napped. I was safe for now. I could hear him whispering, "Stefan, you can't hide in your books forever. Sooner or later, you will have to face me. Face your undoing. You will have to face what you have done." While I wondered when El Sombreron would make his move, I stroked my necklace with the coat of arms pendant, striped blue and red, with an eagle at the crest. I kept reading from Alta California, a book of essays about Spanish and Mexican settlers in the Spanish borderlands. I was reading about the life of Pablo Tak, a Luiseno Indian, who, despite dying at age 19, was a prolific writer and missionary whose extensive writings were the only surviving accounts of the Luiseno language and culture, and one of the most studied reports of missionary life on the frontier. I had a second book in my bag, Memories of Life at a Mission, a biographical account written by Pablo Tak himself. Carl had to get up so he could get something out of his bag in the overheads. When he sat back down, he had a stack of medical reports in hand. The header of his papers read, "Dr. Carl Kellogg, MD, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center," and I spotted a reference to someone named Sal. Carl said. "I have an appointment to keep. I'll be damned if I am going to miss it. The next thing they're going to tell us is the flight is diverted to goddamn Phoenix." On cue, the pilot came back over the PA to inform us that the flight was, indeed, being grounded in Phoenix for the night, and that the airline would arrange for replacement transportation. But given the lateness of the hour, it would have to be the following day. Those that did not wish to sleep in the airport would have a room comped nearby. I was relieved when they first told me about the glioblastoma. I'd gone directly to St. Peter's Episcopal Church and entered the confessional, and I'd told Father Darby how I'd been driving home from the history conference in Ithaca a few years back, after too many celebratory toasts, and quite a few tequila shooters from the minibar to boot. I'd only wanted to sleep in my bed that night. I'd told Father Darby how I'd heard a thud and a crack of my windshield. The blue-jeaned body of a teenage girl hung in the rear view, perfectly cradled in the refracted lamplight. How I'd kept on driving. How many Hail Marys to fix that one. Sabrina offered me a beverage, which I sternly declined, and I asked her softly, "Do you see a man about 6 rows back with a black-brimmed hat?" She turned, dutifully, and then looked down at me with wide eyes. No, I do not, sir," she said. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. I was safe for now. As we began our descent into Phoenix, Carl became apoplectic. He stowed his hands in a rigid, set position on his knees and trained his eyes forward at Sabrina, like she was his jailer. And he stood wrongly accused. "I have an important appointment in the morning in San Diego. I can't be late. I just can't." Carl said all of this more to himself than anything. Sabrina paid no attention. I put my hand on Carl's shoulder and said, "We will figure this out together. We are going to the same place. So, you are proposing we drive around the storm through the night to San Diego? Are you nuts? You want to make that appointment or not?" I asked. And so, we tossed our luggage in the back of a silver Toyota Tacoma 4-door and hit the road. "I saw your paperwork. So, you are a doctor? A surgeon?" Carl said. "What about you?" "I am a history teacher, college level, up at Cornell. My research relates to sojourners and missionaries, all manner of settlers and vagabonds, anyone uprooted from their home and stranded in a foreign land. Aren't they fascinating, I suppose? That book you were reading, it was about one of those? Pablo Tack." "Who?" "A young missionary boy who grew up in the Mission San Luis Rey." "And what makes him so special?" "Pablo Tack? Well, for one, he had a motto. Siempre adelante y nunca para atrás. It was more than a saying. It became his epitaph. He died young. I don't know it for a certainty, but I imagine Pablo Tack didn't live long enough to make a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. Sounds foolish. He's lucky he made it that long. Out on the frontier. Carl's mind seemed trained to detect pathology in everything. You know, Pablo made it to Rome to study for the priesthood, then returned to the frontier. He left behind quite a body of work, made a record of nearly his whole life, day by day. Imagine covering that much ground by age 19. And how did he die, if I might ask? Smallpox. There you go. The boy devotes himself to God, and boom, clapping his hands for effect. He's snuffed out like a match in between God's bloodthirsty fingers. I think it was a gift that God allowed him to finish his mission early. Besides, if Pablo Tack could get that far by 19, then there's hope for a couple of middle-aged codgers like us, don't you think? I said things like this, hope, as if I still dared to wish for an unearned pardon. I wondered if all sojourners are really on the run, each sure, in their own way, that redemption could only be granted, if at all, a long way off from the place where the crime happened. I guess fugitives are always prisoners of the truth. All I see is a promising man stomped under heel by a dictator. So there's no point to suffering. I'm an oncologist. You cure the sick. Cure? Oh no. I specialize in pancreatic cancer. The 5-year survival rate is 12%. My nickname among my colleagues is the Grim Reaper. So, no, I wouldn't exactly say that I cure the sick. More like I chaperone them to death's doorstep. I'm a butcher with dull blades, just an order taker at a meat counter. My patients' diagnoses are like those number dispenser tags in a supermarket. You know those red machines with the Garvey pull-off tags? I call their numbers and deliver the meat to the morgue. Remind me to never call you for a consult, I said. And we both laughed. What is that pendant you were playing with on the plane? Oh, this. It is the DeSantis family crest. A gift from my father. I was raised out by the Mission San Luis Rey by my foster family. I consider myself a DeSantis, but my birth name is Stefan Daskalov. That is a foreign-sounding name, if I ever heard one. Where are you from, originally? I was born in Bulgaria, in the year of the Jubilee. And what was that like, growing up in Eastern Europe? I wouldn't know. My mother and I left when I was 8. Was there something going on there you had to get away from? You could say that. We were Turks, which is not such a good thing if you were living in Bulgaria. There was a national campaign to rename all Turks and erase our ethnicity. My father was an enthusiast for the resistance, and the communist jackboots came and pulled him from our home and took him to a labor camp on the island of Belen on the Danube. He died there that same year, but we never even learned how. And what happened to your mother? After that, my mother and I emigrated to Turkey to escape persecution. She put me on a boat headed to California, promising she'd follow after. She couldn't ever save up enough for her ticket, and I never saw her again. Some years ago, I traveled back to Turkey and found the town where she was buried. It is strange It seems like another world, one that I barely knew. That reminded me that I had another thing to say Hail Marys for. Jesus, that is one hell of a way to start out in life. You know, there was nothing written on her tombstone. Out behind the old house, a real road to nowhere. Traveling west along I-8, we drank tall coffees and looked out on the vast desert, like two teens taking a road trip, rather than two terminally ill hypocrites. The massive orange dunes propagated to infinity, hugging dappled purple shadows for warmth, their peaks glistening in the penetrating spears of mulish moonlight smuggled past the veil. Great towering thunderheads bellowed and filled the sky like totipotent corpuscles injected with black-gray swirls of ink and mercury. Stefan took a wrong turn before Yuma. We finally stopped at a rickety bridge, the McFall Bridge. The bridge cut a path over the Gila River toward the coastal mountains. The GPS glitched and told us to cross, but the sign read, "Bridge closed." Graffiti on the guardrails read, "Bridge to nowhere. We'll have to backtrack and find another way through," I said. "I guess we've come to the end of the road," Carl said, belting out an uncharacteristic laugh, then resuming his rumbling coughs, the gasps and chokes of a stalling engine. "For your sake? I hope not." "Look up there," I said, pointing at two figures walking across the McFall Bridge toward us, carrying canvas sacks. They emerged from the hazy expanse, blown in with the petrichor which flavored the charged and static air. The purple thunderheads pulsed with bursts of voltage, branching like the paradoxical imics of reaching tree limbs and searing flares. The bushes and cactuses accented the barren landscape with the resilient wit of life persisting on vapors, ruffled in a fanning and pitiless wind, trending to death. There was a sudden knock. They were two young boys. I rolled down my window. "I'm Bobo, and this is my friend Amix. We are headed to California. It's been a long journey, and the storm is coming in fast." "Oh, shame," said Carl. "Do you think we could tag along until you get to Yuma? We can help you navigate in the desert. We know the way." I looked over at Carl, who nodded his approval. "Jump in," I said. "The safest way is to backtrack to I-8 and take that all the way down. We are in a hurry." "Is there a faster route?" Carl asked. "Well, you could take the Camino del Diablo, but I wouldn't recommend it." "What is that in English?" "The Devil's Highway." Bobo nodded. Carl let out another hearty laugh. He turned to me and said, "How could we refuse?" And that was when I knew that Carl wasn't long for this world, and guessed that his appointment was not for a special case, but for palliative care. Over my shoulder, I saw that El Sombreron was sitting between the boys. His head hung expectantly over his silver guitar. Death was alive in the cadaverous pallor of Carl's complexion. The color ran out of him like a rich, milky cheddar cheese that starts a bright orange but whitens and hardens so quickly when left out on the cutting board. Carl had already begun to decompose. I wondered if Carl had cats. If you die alone, a dog won't eat you. A hungry cat is another thing altogether. Bobo was a skeletal man, not more than 5'3". His khaki Anouks shirt hugged his body, making him appear in the dark like a human shadow. I see you are reading Pablo Tak, Memories of Life at a Mission. Yes, I am, I said, surprised. Have you read it? Ah, yes. What a heartbreaker. Wait until you get to the last chapter, where he is called back to Rome for ordination. Bobo tossed his sack over his shoulder and began walking back down the Devil's Highway. I thought he died awaiting ordination, I called after, but Bobo was already gone. I had one of the last collector editions sold at auction at San Luis Rey. The thing is, as I watched Bobo and Amix disappear into the dust of the desert, it occurred to me that this book had been out of print for decades, since before these boys were born. Now, it was just Carl, me, and El Sombreron on the Camino del Diablo, in the dead of night, on our way to separate destinations, but sharing one fate. After driving for hours in what must have been circles, the warning light for refilling the gas tank came on, squeaking over and over at regular intervals, like a diseased heart incapable of variation. And we only had one reserve gas can left in the trunk. Carl, I said, let's camp out here for the night and save our last fuel can for the daylight. I don't want to get lost. Carl was looking ghastly and pallid. I have s'mores ingredients. I was saving them for the night after the wedding. But I say we build a proper fire and enjoy them tonight. We gathered sticks, and I used leader fluid, charcoal, and pieces of paper to help get the fire going. Even with all of that, I was barely successful out there in the dark. How did men build fires like these for thousands of years in the hard-hearted blackness? I pulled the sleeping bags out of the trunk, grabbed little baggies with graham crackers, marshmallows, and chocolate squares. Carl livened up, and the two of us chatted late into the night before falling asleep in our sleeping bags. At the edge of the fire, fingers sticky and bellies full. The night grew cold. Before the first rays of efflorescent dawn emerged from the undercroft of Gehenna, I arose, a diaphanous shroud. Carl rose with me. We both looked at the smoldering fire, the fulgent, crackling embers, the hoary, thinning smoke. Two bodies in sleeping bags, cold and stiff in the first light, looking at one another. Then at the horizon, I noticed that the cool desert morning felt warm and radiant on my skin. It shimmered as it touched my arms, like the glint of light off a lizard's scales. Are we almost to the mission? I asked Carl. Carl barely had time to shrug his shoulders before we were interrupted. El Sombreron strutted in a waddling gait down the road ahead, leading his train of mules into our camp. His spurs jingled, and each rock gave its distinct harmony to the singing rowels. The mules whuffled and snorted the bass line. And El Sombreron whistled, while chewing on a stick of straw plucked from the breaching rays of the new sun. The brim of his broad-rimmed black sombrero forever hid his visage. And he came to a stop just before us. "Do you see him?" I asked. Carl nodded. "But when his strength failed him at length," El Sombreron said, and I instinctively continued. "He met a pilgrim shadow." With that, El Sombreron gave a little bow and continued. "O'er his heart a shadow fell." "But which way is the mission?" I asked. "Ride, boldly ride," the shade replied. "To where?" "Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, past the veil." Great towering thunderheads bellowed and filled the sky like totipotent corpuscles injected with black-gray swirls of ink and mercury. Stefan took a wrong turn before Yuma. We finally stopped at a rickety bridge, the McFall Bridge. The bridge cut a path over the Gila. Justice will be served. Sunrise painted the rain-swept rocks of the castle gold as she poured poison into her husband's morning whiskey. The fire of the spirit would mask the ice of the paralytic, which had been crippling Lord Blackstone for months. Lady Gemma Blackstone had everything arranged for the death of her husband would be slow, deservedly so. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and Algernon Blackstone liked ice in his whiskey. Gemma watched the chest of her hated husband rise and fall. His crackling breaths came in stutters. The poison had started work on his lungs. She has lessened the dose to ensure he didn't die suddenly. Everyone needed to know was that Lord Blackstone was a sick man. His twisted mind would meet its match in the gnarled agony of his flesh. She smiled sweetly, best to always smile in case he was looking. Gemma played the part of a doting wife. She fluffed his pillows. She changed the bedpan. She stoked the fire in the night when the servants were gone. "Gemma, is that you?" he rasped, coughing. "It's Algie. What can I get you?" she asked him in the simpering voice he knew her by. "How is it? Do you feel better?" "Maybe," he wheezed. "A solid breakfast will do me the word of good." Gemma nodded and called the butler. "Reginald, Lord Blackstone is awake. Bring the wheelchair." "My whiskey," Lord Blackstone wheezed. "Can't start the day without it." He took the ready crystal tumbler in stiff hands. She had to help him sip it down. "You know you shouldn't, my love. It's your worst vice." "All old men need vices." Lord Blackstone flashed his gold teeth, then closed his eyes in pain as his lungs shot through with agonizing needles of fire. Whiskey burnt away sleep. "Good morning, my lord," said Reginald. The wrinkled butler, older than the stones of the castle, wheeled in a chair that creaked with every turn of the oak wheels. "Good morning, Lady Blackstone." "Good morning, Reginald," she said. Together they helped the gnarled old man into his chair. The butler insisted on pushing him to the dining room. Above the table hung a painting of a hanging family entitled "Justice Will Be Served." Gemma had commissioned the painting to remind her of her mission. Algernon Blackstone had her entire family executed for theft when she was just a girl. Gemma had escaped only because she'd been out on an errand when her mother, father, brother, and sister were sent to the gallows. Only her father had stolen, and only enough food to feed the children. The standard punishment had been the loss of a hand, an acceptable risk for a man who wanted to feed his loved ones. Instead, the Lord of Blackstone Castle had chosen to make an example of the whole Fisher family. High on her stool on the gallows, Gemma's mother had caught her eye. Before her footing was kicked away from her, Angela Fisher mouthed the words, "Live, live for us." Tears in Angela's eyes were the last things Gemma saw before the rope snapped, taut, and the quartet of condemned began kicking, faces twisted in horror. The painted faces looked little like her family, but the painter had captured the terror of the doomed. Gemma was grateful that the likeness of the painting was off. There was no chance anyone would connect her and her blue eyes to the brown-eyed quartet kicking above the banquet table. Justice will be served, Gemma promised herself as she did whenever she ate. Revenge had hardened her, but it was slow. Years of practicing her accent, her manners, which utensils to use, had honed her for the mission. A lord with a grudge against Algernon Blackstone had presented her to the widower as a cousin. Lecherous Lord Blackstone hadn't wasted a week before wedding himself to the teenaged Gemma. "The cook will be finished with breakfast shortly. Can I cut you some bread and spread it for you?" Reginald asked. The 80-year-old butler's perfect posture contrasted the bent back of Lord Blackstone. "Yes, please," Gemma nodded. Fresh bread, hot from the oven, steamed as the bread knife sawed through it. The wedge-shaped slice belied distraction as the butler watched the dining room door expectantly. Normally, his every cut was perfect. "Something on your mind, Reginald?" Algernon Blackstone asked, raising a graying eyebrow. "Just an anniversary of sorts, Lord Blackstone." Glowing life Gemma had never seen sparkled in Reginald's red-veined eyes. His smile unnerved her. Watching the door, she gripped a butter knife with white knuckles. "What are you up to?" The ancient doors whined on hinges that needed to be oiled as the cook entered with a covered tray. Walking down the table, Camilla set the tray down at the end. The silver dome revealed 2 matchlock pistols. Both were loaded and ready to fire. "Reginald? Camilla? What is this?" Lord Blackstone's voice was outraged. He tried to stand, shaking, but broke into a fit of coughing. The butler and cook began laughing. Camilla took both pistols, handed one to Reginald, and aimed hers at Gemma. "Do you remember the girl you had drowned for spilling soup in your lap?" asked Camilla. She waited for recognition in the Lord's eyes. "You don't, do you?" Victory morphed into outrage on the cook's face. "Was my daughter's life so forgettable to you?" "I don't," Lord Algernon began. "Soup!" Reginald yelled. "Spilled soup!" He leveled his pistol at Lord Blackstone. "You could have beaten her. You could have locked her in the stocks. You could have simply fired her. No, you killed her. Our beautiful girl drowned over fucking soup." Reginald's forever gray face was red. Veins throbbed in his forehead. "She was your daughter?" Algernon asked, looking from the butler to the cook to Lady Blackstone. "Our only daughter," Camilla nodded. "Who you killed 20 years ago today." 20 years? Gemma asked, unable to stop herself. "You waited 20 years? He killed my family 7 years ago and I was nearly done with him." Camilla's gun aimed at her heart as she pointed at the painting above the table. "You commissioned that painting yourself," Reginald said. He waved his free hand at Justice Will Be Served, to remind me of the mother, father, sister, and brother he had hanged. Palms raised, Gemma pushed herself out of the gilded chair she'd been sitting in 3 times a day for years. "Your maiden name was Sinclair," Camilla snarled. "I was here when Lord William Sinclair delivered you to Lord Blackstone." With every word, Gemma saw the old woman working herself up to shooting Gemma. To him she was as guilty as Lord Blackstone. He hated Algernon. I told Lord Sinclair my marriage to Lord Blackstone would be his downfall. William was only too happy to help. "I'll have you all hanged," said Lord Blackstone. He slammed a gnarled fist into the table and winced. Convulsing, he clutched at his chest. "You'll never hurt anyone again," Gemma told him. "I've been seeing to that for months." She turned to Reginald. "I've been poisoning his morning whiskey." "What?" said Lord Blackstone, the butler and the cook as one. "It's no coincidence he can barely move," said Gemma, looking from Reginald to Camilla. "It's the poison." "You told me you believed in justice," wheezed Algernon Blackstone. "I do," said Gemma, her face releasing all of the anger she'd held in for years. "Justice for my mother Angela, for my father David, for my sister Alice, for my brother Darren, all murdered so that you could make a point." She prodded his chest. His hand moved to catch her finger at a snail's pace. "There's poison in my Janelle No. 5 perfume. I've been adding a drop to your whiskey since I bought the rat killer from a farmer at last year's summer fair." "He stole from me. I had to set an example," said Lord Blackstone of her father. "Do you know how many one-handed thieves there were walking about in the town, making a mockery of justice, of the law?" He looked at the painting, unrepentant. He gathered his resolve. "Then you should have whipped him, locked him in the stocks, banished him." Gemma's voice was colder than the iron bars on Blackstone Castle's windows in midwinter. "I have a responsibility to uphold the law of the land. A liar like you could never understand. Lords maintain order, otherwise there would be chaos." He caught his wife's eye, imploring. "It was nothing personal, Gemma. I didn't know you." "That's the problem, Algernon. It's never personal. Life means nothing to you. Their daughter meant nothing to you." Lady Blackstone waved a hand at the butler and the cook. "It's personal for us and everyone who's had their life destroyed by your twisted vision of justice." "You're serious, aren't you?" Reginald asked. "Camilla, take the gun. I have to know." He handed his pistol to the woman who had prepared every meal Algernon had eaten for 20 years. His coattails flicked as he flitted through the dining hall door. His footsteps retreated, clattering along the flagstones. "Gemma," said Lord Blackstone. Desperation was writ large in his bulging eyes. "You've been my wife for 5 wonderful years. I've loved you with all my heart. I've had the hard task of keeping the peace in these parts, but I've never meant you harm. Gemma, I love you. Please don't do this." He pressed his palms together. "In the name of God, spare me." "God?" Gemma scoffed. "Love?" She slapped the table, giving Algernon and Camilla a fright. "You would have hung me with the rest of my family if I hadn't been checking the family crab traps. I returned to find my entire family on the gallows on your order. I watched them hang because you had decreed it." Tears of anger ran through her powder makeup. "God may have said, 'Thou shalt not steal,' but I'm sure he gave precedence to 'Thou shalt not kill.' You have a lot of blood on your hands, Lord Blackstone." At his title, Gemma turned on the stately accent which had been slipping as she told her story. "Don't think I trust you," said the cook to Lady Blackstone. "I've watched you playing the doting wife for years. I've seen you fawning over this monster. I've heard you praise his firm hand for the law." The gray hair of the old woman was slick with sweat that beaded on her forehead. "That's all it was, Camilla. An act. You must have known my mother Angela, and me. My name is Jenny Fisher. I lived in Blackstone until the day he hung my family. I ran to Winshore to escape. I learned to copy Lord Sinclair, working in his kitchen. I learnt the way the gardener poisoned foxes and rats. I formed a plan. I convinced Lord Sinclair to pass me off as his own to spite Lord Blackstone. Jenny Fisher took a deep breath before her next admission. Then I killed Lord Sinclair. What? Algernon turned to look at her. A murderess in my bed all these years. I was in good company as far as that goes, Jenny said coldly, the lesser of two evils. Lord Sinclair was no saint himself. She chewed her nail as the sound of Reginald's perfectly shined shoes returned. I don't know what's in this bottle, said the butter, holding up the exquisite green glass. But it's not perfume. It's certainly not Janelle number 5. None of it touched you, did it? Jenny asked. A drop is dangerous. 3 is death. She's telling the truth? Camilla asked. The gun aimed at Lady Blackstone lowered from Jenny's heart to her stomach. This is too much. Lord Blackstone has no shortage of enemies. That's no secret. Reginald took a gun from his wife and sat heavily 5 seats down from the lord and lady of the castle. How can we know for sure she's telling the truth? Camilla asked. We've waited all these years. I'm not letting revenge slip away after all that time. I want to see the light leave his eyes. I want to watch his soul leave this husk on the way to hell. Camilla, please. Algernon's lip quivered. You shut your murderous mouth, Lord Blackstone. I want nothing but death from you. Camilla stretched her arm from point blank until the barrel was 1 chair from the wretch who'd brought them all together. Let me do what I was planning to do. Jenny tilted her head as her mother had when she'd haggled with Sellers. He drinks from that bottle, as much as he likes. We can all watch justice be done. That way you'll know. Gemma! Algernon Blackstone tried to stand and coughed up mucus and blood for his futile efforts. My name is Jenny. Jenny Fisher. Always was. Always will be. Daughter of Angela and David. Sister to Alice and Darren. I want you to know that as you die. Her dress, green silk and cotton, fluffed her out to twice the size as she stood by his side. We have glasses. Let me serve him. Number. I'm not drinking anything you give me, Lord Blackstone said with steel in his voice. Then let them shoot you. I'm sure that hurts more, said Jenny with a cruel smile. Whether you die isn't up for debate, husband. Your choice now is how you want to go. Reaching across the long table, she took an empty glass and opened her hand, waiting for the green bottle in Reginald's grip. When he handed her the former perfume container, she poured a shot of it into the waiting glass and handed it to Lord Blackstone. Silence took a seat beside them at the table and waited patiently. Harsh winds from across the sea could scarcely be heard over the sound of the host's labored breathing. Algernon Blackstone stared at the clear liquid in the glass, pure as water. His hand trembled. I can't smell it, said the Lord of Blackstone Castle. That was the point, husband. The woman he'd known as Gemma for years watched him expectantly. This or a gun wound? He asked, raising the glass of death. You could jump from the battlements onto the rocks if you like, said Camilla. I've dreamed of pushing you off them for years. Justice will be served, said Lord Algernon. His shoulders sank. Is it too late to say that I'm sorry? He looked from one executioner to another. No, said Reginald. But it's far too late for an apology to get you out of this. Algernon coughed. Closing his eyes, he nodded. Well, I'm sorry anyway. I tried to see the world in black and white. It was easier that way. He swirled his doom in the glass. It tasted fine in whiskey. If I'm to go, can it be in bed? One last sleep? What do you think? Reginald asked Camilla. As long as it's done. The cook nodded. Back to bed then, Lord Blackstone. The butler took the glass from Algernon's shaking hands, gave it to his wife, then wheeled his master away. Jenny walked behind Reginald with Camilla's gun aimed at her back. The butler helped the lord into his four-poster bed. Jenny filled the rest of the glass with amber alcohol and handed it to her husband. "Looks delicious," said Lord Blackstone. He gave them all a vicious smile. "I forgive you for murdering me. Hopefully you can all find peace together, knowing what you did, what you are." Laughing through a cough, he drank down his whiskey. "Trying to divide us with your last words?" Jenny sat by Lord Algernon's side. "How you? Just remember my family as you die." She took his hand, already immobile. "And our daughter," said Camilla. "He can't talk," said Jenny. "He's not breathing. This is the end." She looked into Algernon's bulging eyes. "Justice is served." Lord Blackstone's chest stopped moving. He twitched weakly, then ceased. "Is he dead?" Reginald asked. "Number not yet, but it is inevitable now." Jenny closed the liver-spotted eyelids of her husband. His skin was cold. Her fingers on his neck felt the beat of his heart slowing to a stop. "It's done. I thought I would feel something." Camilla looked at Reginald. "I thought I would feel some peace at last." "What now?" Reginald asked. "Breakfast?" Lady Blackstone suggested. The day had not gone as planned. She had 2 loose ends to tie off and always planned better on a full stomach. Farmhouse dinner. Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. "Stop standing, get working." Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. "My husband Mick is missing," she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body, and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. That's quite a road to get here. Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through. D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. Thanks. D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa with a Gracie has. I speak English. So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe? D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. His name was Mick, Christina said in a low voice. Mick, your husband, has been missing. Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. For 3 days. Yes. Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house, or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know. Christina clenched her apron over and over. Did you look for him, or call anyone? D.S. Maloney barked. I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the Iron Door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there. Okay, do you have a description? Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up. Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker. She put her arms out, forming a large belly. And his face? Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. Oh. Office Marks turned away with a frown. Mean mug. Any idea where he could be? D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg. Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then, in the snow, she wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Or a wolf got him. Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me. Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. I'll check outside. You look around in here. D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide? Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. What's this? D.S. Maloney walked back in. The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else. Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. My broom, Christina offered. Is this blood? D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. Sometimes. Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough. Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story? No, you can see. Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. I cleaned up the rest. She collapsed in a chair. Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapey outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit. Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station you call around, hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles and rolled and taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think? D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us, to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life, a Christmas Day heist. A grande whole milk latte and all the money in the cash register, Bernie said to the cashier while pointing the gun at the barista. Or the barista dies. People usually value other people's lives more than their own, or at least they should. The age 20s, something cashier's face was twitching. It was clear he had never been in a robbery before. Calgary is a safe city, or at least it was before the people from Toronto started showing up. Is this for real? Are you actually robbing the store? The cashier said. Does this gun look real to you? Bernie allowed the cashier to have a good look at the cold, hard steel of the Glock G19. The cashier raised his hands. It felt good to watch other people do as they were told for a change. Behind Bernie, a woman's voice said, "That's not a good decision." "And why not?" Bernie sneered. "Full fat milk. You should choose skim or soy." Bernie glanced around and saw a young woman with lightly bleached hair, that new style that gives women a zombie-like appearance. She was wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon figure on it. Definitely from Toronto, the weird ones are. Or Vancouver. "I didn't ask your opinion." The cashier behind the register said, "The grande full-fat latte comes to $7.99. Bernie pulled out a credit card, an action born out of habit, then put it back away. The robbery was not going the right way at all. "You are going to give me at least $500, Bernie demanded to the cashier. The girl with the bleached hair began talking over her shoulder again. "I'd like a half skinny flat white with a shot of hazelnut using my Starbucks bonus points." Firing a bullet into the ceiling would have made this robbery easier. Calgary police interview of suspect Bernie Schultz by Officer Ringenberg. Or, in your own words, explain to me what happened earlier today. BS. I usually drink coffee at Tim Hortons, so I thought it would be better to rob a Starbucks. Calgary is a big city, but this is Canada. People know each other. At Tim Hortons, no one ever gives feedback on what drink I'm ordering. Who let all the Starbucks open in Calgary anyway? It must have been those arseholes from Toronto. The same Torontonian arseholes who voted for Trudeau. How did I get here? One day, I was the site administrator of the biggest oil project in Alberta. The next day, global warming and electric vehicles means I've lost my job. Then I was dragged from my home by government thugs. They wore different uniforms than you, but were in uniform from my home. My brother, who helped me pack my things, said I needed to get used to change. "This is 2023, he said. "One door closes and another door opens," he says. My brother has a big mouth. At my new place in the sticks close to the forest, the fires worry me. I watch the news on CBC every night and have chats with my neighbor Ted about the fires. They didn't happen before. Not before Trudeau took over. Anyways, Ted says we need to fight the system. He said if we could get $500 together, we can drive to the Yukon and live in an abandoned cabin over the summer and get away from the lunatics in Calgary. Or, what's Ted's last name? BS. Bennett. 2 N's and 2 T's. So back to the story. Since Trudeau took over, everything is about pointing out other people's mistakes. People are always telling me what words I'm not supposed to say anymore. Well, thank God some things stay the same. Once a week, me and Ted walk to the Tim Hortons nearby. Even Timmy's didn't have a Christmas tree this year. But that's not going to stop Bernie from having the spirit of Christmas. At that other place, people just wouldn't listen to a woman with a gun. I wanted to shoot a bullet into the ceiling to stop them all yammering. And then you all came in. OR. Thank you, Bernie. That's all we need today. We're still collecting evidence. Before I start shooting, there's something I'd like to say, Bernie announced. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. She turned from the cashier to the barista. And you too. Merry Christmas. Ma'am, here's your latte, and have a Merry Christmas, the cashier said. Then he added, I don't usually say that, and looked at the other people listening in the store. They had stopped talking to each other and were paying attention closely, in the way every high school teacher dreams of. Bernie gave everyone present a stern look, one that showed she meant business. Her arm was getting tired. She forgot how heavy guns were. The cashier had been holding his hands up for quite a while and was getting tired too. "Sorry, ma'am. I can't give you all the money in the cash register," he said slowly and calmly, "because this is a cashless store." His eyeballs moved back and forth between Bernie and the sign next to the cash register. It said, "This is a cashless store." Bernie groaned. "It's because of those people from Toronto again." "I'm from Calgary," the cashier explained. Bernie didn't know how to respond to that. "Doesn't your son come in here?" the cashier asked. Bernie realized at that moment she should have worn a disguise. Outside, flashing red lights appeared. Bernie watched with concern as police cars filled the parking lot. The cashier, in a kind voice, the tone a person might use to give a suggestion to a friend that the color of his sweater doesn't match his pants, said, "They might shoot you if you're holding that gun. It doesn't matter what age you are." As Bernie thought about putting the gun down, one of the police looked into the window and then walked straight in. Bernie has thought they might surround the building and start a kidnapping negotiation. She had planned to ask for a taxi to the Yukon to let everyone go. "Bernie Schultz?" the policeman asked. "Who's asking? Let's take you back to Sage Hill," he said and walked straight toward her. Bernie lowered the gun that lacked bullets. Her gig was up. The police knew retirees in Calgary wouldn't give up their guns, but the retirement homes had taken away their bullets. The cashier cleared his throat. "Just for my Instagram account. Why were you trying to rob the store?" Bernie wanted to quote Willie Sutton, because that's where all the money is. But it didn't seem to fit this situation anymore. She mulled it over. The police weren't in a rush. She told the cashier, "For once, I just wanted to be in control of my own life." The cashier thought about it, then said, "The office workers that come into our store and put in complicated orders, I think have the same reason." When he noticed how many people were watching him, he added, "Not that that stereotype is representative of all people who work in offices." In the language of her own generation, Bernie explained that she also didn't mean any offense to anyone by her words and actions that day. "Sorry," she said. She left the store with the police, one holding her shoulder in case she tripped on the front step, not Mary. The unnerving chorus of cutlery scraping porcelain echoed throughout the room. Tension hung thick in the air, palpable enough to reach up and slice into it with my steak knife. Beside me, my sister sniffed. From my periphery, I could see her red-rimmed eyes staring blankly at her untouched plate. I cut into the slab before me, crimson juices forming a greasy puddle. I took a bite, relished the tenderness. The peas encroached into the sea of mashed potatoes like invading soldiers. "Would you please pass the potatoes, Mary?" Mother asked from the other end of the table. I nodded, heaving the dish over to my sister to pass on. Her gaze remained fixed on her plate as she sat on both hands, legs trembling. A small, choked sob escaped from her lips. "That's quite enough, Leah," Father growled, stabbing into his own steak. Leah shakily grasped the bowl, ushering it to Mother. Between them sat Jonah, barely peeking over the edge of the table and pushing his food about. At the tender age of 5, he was blissfully ignorant. I chewed a bit of gristle in the next bite, watching Father's brow furrow as he took a sip of wine, a rogue tendril staining his snowy beard burgundy. He cleared his throat, an action which rendered the table still, waiting with bated breath. Children, the ultimate test is almost upon us. I hated the way he spoke, like that of an old novel. Mother rested a bony hand over his, and listened intently. With her other hand, she fingered the gold cross hanging from her neck. We will not let the enemy destroy our union. We will not succumb to their devilish tendencies, for they are blind to the ways in which we serve him. They will never know such unwavering love and loyalty, and for that, I pity them. Mother nodded in understanding, her silvery bun bobbing. Father tossed his napkin over his plate and stood, chair screeching dully on concrete. We watched as he climbed the nearby staircase. Stray spots of maroon that had earlier leached into the wood marked his steps, evidence of what he'd done to protect the sanctity of his family. There was once a time when I would have chased after him, lunging for the open door, yearning for sunlight, but the scar on the back of my head itched like an ugly deterrent. I made it a point to constantly remind myself of who I was, where I came from. Fragments of memories, the way my mother used to rub my back in the morning when she woke me for school, the sound of my father's work shoes on the hardwood floors every evening, the hum of the fish tank in my childhood bedroom remained filed away in the depths of my mind, growing fuzzier with each passing day. But I dared not speak of these memories. They were mine and only mine. Leah, now gangly and naive in the throes of adolescence, was more pliable. I imagined she couldn't even recall things like the details of her mother's face or the way it felt to ride a school bus. When mother and father told her something, she accepted it at face value. And Jonah, in all his cherubic innocence, had never known another life. The harsh fluorescents were his sun and moon, every day the same. Sometimes it made me want to weep, but then I reminded myself he knew no different. Perhaps it was better that way. Father's thunderous descent broke my thoughts. Mother stood at his approach, collecting some of the equipment he came bearing. As he laid a piece before each of us, the breath caught in my throat. My eyes followed the transition from dark metal into laminated wood that led down to an unmistakable component, a trigger. Out of the children, only I knew how to operate a gun. When I was 8 years old, my father took me hunting for the first time. I recalled the way the cold seeped into my fingers and toes as we waited for hours. We flinched at any flicker of movement, which often turned out to be a rummaging squirrel. But then he arrived. Statuesque and bristled, his sinewy figure strutted into the open field, unaware of his armed audience. His antlers were a thorny crown that dipped with him as he scoured the earth. "Take the shot," my father egged, helping me hold the heavy rifle. We'd gone over the process an umpteen amount of times, but now the steely grip felt wrong. I dropped my shoulder, finger slipping from the trigger, as the barrel slung towards the ceiling of the tree stand, and my father cursed. That was the first time my father swore in front of me. In one swift motion, he grabbed the gun, took aim, and fired. I covered my ears and watched in silent horror as the creature's body quivered with the impact. His legs buckled, and he scrambled for a brief moment before taking off, blood spilling from his flank. My father took my shoulders in his hands and kneeled square before me. "You don't ever let the gun drop like that, especially with the safety off," he scolded. Hot tears coursed down my cheeks, stinging the wind-chapped skin. My father profusely apologized for swearing and raising his voice, wrapping me in a hug. But I wasn't crying because he yelled. I kept replaying the look of sheer panic as the bullet ripped through the deer's flesh, the terror and confusion he must have felt. We trailed our victim for a short while, following the blood-stained leaves of early winter. He didn't make it far, having collapsed in a small clearing. Panting laboriously, his onyx eyes stared up in blank defeat, and I saw myself in their reflection. Before I could process the scene, Another shot rang out, and the deer stilled. A kill shot, my father explained, to end his suffering. When you see the enemy, you take the shot, Father said then, breaking my trance. I was back in my chair, staring down at the weapon before me. Leah ran a trembling finger over the safety, ensuring it was on per Father's crash course. Jonah, too small to wield such a device, was given a knife instead. Never before had we been permitted to use any kind of weaponry. Anything more than a butter knife was forbidden. Father and Mother claimed it was for our own safety, but I knew better. And that didn't stop me from fantasizing a ballpoint pen embedded in a windpipe, a broken bedpost as a club to the head. I'd had my fair share of time to ponder the possibilities. Leah and Jonah may have been taken at malleable ages, but I refused to fully yield. The slight quiver in Father's hands and the way Mother's complexion paled meant it was all hands on deck. Though I didn't know whose blood painted the staircase, sticky on the soles of Father's shoes, it had led us to such a cataclysm that I dared to dream about life beyond the concrete. I yearned to return to a world where my name was my own, not the one I'd been forced to adopt. I longed to hug my mother and father, to bask in the sunlight on a summer day, to see my friends, to witness the light at the end of a nearly decade-long tunnel. Could this be the end? The gunmetal was cool in my clammy palms. I contemplated aiming it at Father or at Mother. It would be so easy. But what if it wasn't loaded? What if it was just for show? And could I really do it? "Let us go," Father commanded, leading our ragtag troop up the stairs. At the top, Father unlatched the door, leading us into an empty hall with another door at its opposing end. Bringing up the rear, I glanced back into the abyss where time passed indefinitely, and as the next door opened into a moonlit room, I realized I would never allow myself to return. Gilded crosses glinted from every wall as we wound through the house, and like something from a movie, a muffled voice seeped in through the cracks in the windows and doors. "Come out with your hands up." "Father," Leah croaked. "Who is that?" Father ignored her, the click of his safety flipping off. He slung the gun around his back, nodding at Mother as he approached the door. The rush of blood thrummed in my ears. Leah mimicked Father and switched her safety off, and Mother did the same. Greasy coils of nausea knotted my gut as I followed their lead. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Nothing about the unfolding situation felt good or right or godly. Father gripped the doorknob with a fierceness and turned. Golden porch light flooded the entryway. For a moment, Father's face looked younger in the warm glow, and I wondered what led him to this path in life. Slowly, he raised his hands above his head and stepped outside. "Drop your weapon!" an extraneous voice shouted. "It's over, Arthur," another called. "Do the right thing and drop your weapon." "I'm afraid I can't do that," Father replied simply, as if he were declining an invitation to a party. "Your godlessness is a stain on this earth, and I have to protect my family from such evil. I can't let you destroy the Lord's work. You think you can interfere with his plan?" Disconcerted grumbles echoed as a reply. "Dear?" Father called. Mother, gun cradled in her arms, crept to his side. Her skin was sallow, brow damp with prickles of sweat. The woman, always so composed, seemed to be cracking. "Mrs. Goodfellow, drop your weapon now," the second voice commanded. Tensions heightened with each passing second. "Put down your weapon and put your hands up." Negotiations persisted, but I knew Mother was as stubborn as a mule and loyal as a dog. She would follow Father to the ends of the earth. The crunch of boots on gravel drew near, Father stiffened. "Not another step," he threatened, raising his gun. "Don't turn this into a standoff, Arthur," the voice urged. "That's not going to do either of us any good." A treacherous moment of silence ticked by. Every part of me trembled. "I will not let you tear this family apart," Father declared coldly. "Maud," he said, nodding at Mother, who lifted her gun. Her finger made contact with the trigger, and she pulled. A deafening blast ripped through the cool night air, and all hell broke loose. Shouts of anger and bewilderment erupted, and I watched as Mother's body lurched back in a swarm of bullets. In collapsing, her gun fired. I fell to the floor, covering the important parts of myself. Father crawled lamely over the threshold, dragging Mother's body with him. With a weak kick, he shut and locked the door. Blood from their matching wounds seeped into the floor, a crimson trail smeared behind them. Amidst the chaos, Father tenderly brushed stray hairs from Mother's face. He caressed her cheek in his calloused hand as she gasped for air, her blouse soaked through and the cross dangling from her neck now stained. Faint whispers of prayer spilled from his lips as he continued to comfort Mother. Barked orders swirled beyond the window panes, the thud of boots heavy on the porch. From the floor, I glanced around. Jonah was nowhere to be found. "Jonah?" I called quietly. "Leah, Jonah's not." I turned. Leah lay face down nearby, arms splayed by her sides and gun resting under the nearby sofa. "Leah?" On shaking limbs, I clawed my way over to her. Terror gripped my throat so viciously I struggled to breathe. Thick locks of brunette cascaded into the floor, shielding her face from view. I carefully grabbed her shoulder, rolling her over. A strangled cry escaped me as I recoiled at the sight. Blood trickled from her forehead down the bridge of her nose between lifeless eyes. The bile that earlier threatened to purge itself did so then. I wiped my mouth, one last dry heave racking my body, before curling up beside Leah. Garbled whispers across the room caught my attention, and I looked to see Father lying beside Mother, gazing up at the ceiling of the foyer. Though worse for wear, he still managed to recite the Lord's Prayer unfalteringly. Mother remained limp, devoid of life. "Mary?" Father called blindly, like a sick game of Marco Polo. "Mary, child, are you still there?" I rose, stepping gingerly until I stood over top of him. His snowy beard, once stained with wine, was now marred with fatal streaks of maroon. "She's dead," I said solemnly. "Leah's dead." I didn't want to reveal that Mother's gun misfiring was the cause. I wanted him to think it was his fault, which, truthfully, it was. Everything was his fault. Sometimes, we as servants of the Lord must make the ultimate sacrifice. "Shut up," I hissed, jabbing the barrel of my gun into his forehead. Father grew silent for a moment. "Mary, you are a daughter of the one true King," he rasped. "You are our last hope at ending the war of evil that has been waged against us. When you see the enemy, take the shot." I sniffed. "You're right, Father." His breathing was ragged, blood curdling in his lungs as we spoke. A twinge of sorrow panged my heart as I gazed down at the dying man before me. But then I remembered all the hurt he'd inflicted, all the years he'd stolen, and anger sizzled in my veins. Realization flashed across his face. "Mary." A single blast rang out, a kill shot to end his suffering. The footsteps and chatter outside ceased. For a moment, the world was silent. "My name's not Mary," I spat, dropping the gun. With a quick yank, I tore the gold cross from my neck, dropping it onto Father's still chest. A muffled cry emanated from somewhere close by. My heart clenched. "Jonah?" I called, wheeling around in search of the noise. I padded across the living room to the pantry where the cries seemed to stem from. Carefully, I turned the knob and opened the door. Head buried between his knees, Jonah sat curled in a ball. Jonah. I rubbed his back, and he glanced up. His eyes shone with tears. "Jonah, it's okay. I'm here." Just as the front door splintered open under the crack of a boot, I wrapped him in a hug. Fall family feud. Local missing children discovered in police raid after officer slain. Abducted children found in home of local religious leaders. My name's not Mary. Young woman's fight for survival in House of Horrors.